Many of you know that I have long argued that one of the most shameful chapters in the history of our involvement in theatres of war can be described in 3 words: the Brereton Report. This is a 2020 report by the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force, one Brereton, Paul Brereton, regarding alleged war crimes by Australian Special Forces in Afghanistan. You will also recall that this was another ABC job, and acting on hearsay and hardly credible evidence, servicemen from Afghanistan via the Brereton Report became, by inference, guilty. All of them. Guilty without walking up the steps of a court of law. Brereton happens to be Major General Paul Brereton, a judge in the New South Wales Supreme Court and an Army Reserve officer. One wonders whether his identification with the epauletted starched shirt brigade at the head of Australia's Defence Forces would provide the objectivity that should exist in these circumstances, but I'll leave that for another day. You may also remember at the time that the Brereton Report was made public, the public utterances of Prime Minister Morrison played into Chinese hands. China loved the international media attention that our soldiers were murdering Afghan soldiers and prisoners, so the Brereton Report argued. But before the Prime Minister, Morrison had read the report, alleging, quote, disgraceful and a profound betrayal of Australian Defence Forces professional standards and expectations, unquote, Prime Minister Morrison described the report's conclusions as brutal truths. Morrison hadn't even read the report. But this led to all sorts of apologies to Afghanistan from top politicians and the top military brass. We sucked up, we apologised, we ingratiated ourselves to Afghanistan leadership over unproven allegations, inspired, of course, by an ABC report. Then the Defence Force Chief, Angus Campbell, talked about stripping all our special forces of their medals. The new Defence Minister in the Morrison government, Peter Dutton, here's this man again. Hey, don't we need a cop on the beat? Peter Dutton stopped this from happening. Nonetheless, men who put their lives on the line, and I've spoken to many of them, and their wives to serve in Afghanistan came home and were virtually terrorised. They were dismissed. Their families treated like criminals, and I mean that. Treated like homes raided, possessions taken. Unbelievable. And now this Angus Campbell's at it again. He wants to remove awards. He's had a go again. You see, new government. He wants to remove awards from some soldiers who held command positions in the Afghanistan war following the unproven findings of the Brereton inquiry. Nothing's been proven against these men, but early this month we heard that Campbell had written to several current and former Australian Defence Force members informing them that their honours for distinguished and conspicuous service on warlike operations could soon be cancelled. Campbell, the Chief of Defence, declared his, quote, consideration, this was the letter said, consideration of your command accountability is now closed. And Campbell told these men of war, he'd referred the termination of their decorations to the Defence Minister, Richard Marles. Now, Richard Marles is a decent man. He should throw the Campbell correspondence in the bin. But you see, here is the rub of the Brereton Report. Digest this. Inspector General Brereton used immunity from prosecution to obtain evidence. Could this hairy-chested Campbell tell us how many soldiers who were subjected to aggressive and intimidating questions while at the same time suffering from PTSD, how many have since committed suicide? Tell us, Mr. Campbell, was immunity from prosecution used to obtain evidence? Tell us, General Campbell, were there criminally implicated informants desperate for a get-out-of-jail immunity deal, offering the Brereton inquiry evidence against others, which the inquiry was willing to hear? Evidence against others to save their own skin. And if the politicians want brutal truths, tell the nation how many witnesses gave evidence to these hearings with the assurance that their evidence could not be used against them. You won't hear this stuff from Campbell and the Starched Shirt Brigade. Were any admitted war criminals given or offered immunity in return for their cooperation with the Brereton inquiry to secure evidence against any other soldier? But now to the real guts of the issue.